Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And today's voice is the one and only Austin Stout. Thank you for coming on again, Austin.
Hello,
You have to watch the
repeat.
video. I love it. Now, today we're going to talk about sleep, and I'd like to sort of go on many different tangents of,
Okay.
sleep as a bodybuilder in preps, in off season, sleep apnea, hygiene. Like, there's loads that we can cover, and I feel like, people just sort of think, oh, you need a sleep routine and that's it. But as a competitor or even bodybuilder going through different phases, there's actually quite a lot to it, isn't there?
Yes. So first off, thank you for not asking me to talk about gut health again for like the 3,000th time in the last 30 days. But I do like talking about it, but sleep's something different. So thank you. Yeah. So I think the interesting thing about sleep is a lot of people, and you already mentioned it, they really fixate on the routine, the nighttime routine, and what that entails. Uh, but if we look at what sleep actually is or how it happens, it's more of a circadian rhythm, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Issue. So think of that in its totality. Like, what does circadian rhythm encompass? It's all day, right? Like, there's a rhythm that we should we should be replicating on a daily basis. And that circadian rhythm dictates a lot of things, right? I mean, hormones, adrenal function, even, when cortisol is going up and down, other than acute stressors that are coming at us, right? There is a background rhythm that's going on. Neurochemicals like serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, like all these things. So you can't just like, and I say all this because you can't just do everything wrong and then do a sleep routine, whatever that is, right, for that person, and then do your sleep routine for 15 minutes. I don't know, like whatever. It's not going to work. I mean, my whole point is that you could probably, in fact, you could probably flip that and have very little sleep routine. But if you did most of the other things right and you were replicating sleep and wake times pretty consistently, things like that, you probably wouldn't really need to do that much. And anyone that's listening that is pretty consistent with sleep and wake times that feels kind of what I'm talking about, you, for example, if you're used to going to bed at 10 p.m., if you're consistently doing these things correctly, you could be anywhere in the world and at 10 p.m. you're going to get tired. It's just going to be like, oh, it's bedtime. Right? It's You're not doing anything in particular. It's just the fact that that is when your body is used to releasing a lot of these inhibitory type of neurochemicals, and hopefully it's if it's dark enough, then melatonin as well. So I I think it's like kind of ironic that people get so focused on sleep routine but forget about the rhythm and how that's really affecting it.
Yeah, I feel like as well, there's the morning, the part of your day in the morning. It's like you can have a morning routine as well. Then you can obviously have your training, your meal times, your bedtime. And as a bodybuilder, the more structure we can get, generally speaking, I know it's going to change, but it's like you get hungry at a certain time, don't you? If you eat at the same time every day. And this relates to, just getting in that structure and that routine to
Yeah.
facilitate success. It's just then as
Yep.
well, and it made me think of this when you get thrown off your routine or you are out and you're like, oh God, I'm so fucking tired because I'm used to going to
Yeah.
bed. That can throw, of course, bodybuilders that are of an obsessive nature or whatever. It's quite hard to sometimes, instill that sometimes you need to be a bit more flexible as well.
Yeah. You actually probably have your first bowel movement of the day at the same time too.
Yeah, yeah.
Digestion is somewhat circadian based, a lot more than people realize. So there's another one. If you guys have, especially you coaches out there, they're some of the worst.
Yeah.
They like because they're self-employed, they're answering their updates at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, going to bed super late and waking up super late, and then like they come to me and their digestion is wrecked. I'm like, well, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you still work on a light dark cycle just like everyone else. You're not an exception to the rule. But anyhow, what were we saying? previously? We were talking about
Well, if we go
what was the
into the sleep routine side of things, so as you highlighted, it's basically, I feel like a few years ago it became a bit of a buzzword, and it was like, have you got your sleep routine? Have you got your blue light blockers? Like the stuff that sort of went round, and then everyone's like, yeah, I do this sleep routine and what have you. I actually would like to sort of thought provoke you in regards to when you can become so stressed by a sleep routine
hmm.
that actually it's counterproductive for what we're talking about of quality of sleep as well.
Yeah, what should so what's the goal of a sleep routine?
Yeah.
Let's think about that first. Or what is the goal of any parasympathetic activity? It should be parasympathetic. It should be calming in a way. It's funny you mentioned that because I was talking to, but we had done a podcast on this, a lot of this 2 weeks ago, I think. And then we had also, or no, it might have been last week, or yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. And then we'd also done another podcast, Joe, Jeffrey, and I from the UK last week, talking about this concept as well. And I would say that a lot of people are trying to force these parasympathetic activities, right? They're trying to force them, which in turn creates more hyperfixation, which in turn creates more sympathetic drive, and on you go around in a circle. And then you probably try to search for something else to fix it, or maybe you stop doing the thing you're doing and try something else, or you even just layer more on top of what you're already doing. So
Yeah.
now the process just added a step,
Mm.
right? So read between the lines on what I'm saying here. It's not hard to figure out what that's going to do. Um, you almost you can't again, so you can't force that response. Now, the goal going back to what I was saying prior, the goal of a sleep routine should be to relax you. I mean, essentially, I mean that's really what the goal is getting you ready to sleep. So, for example, if you wanted to go to bed at 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. and you were doing something really stimulating or you were really stressed, I don't know, whatever, and then you just got into bed, you'd have a hard time falling asleep,
Yeah.
right? You can't just fall asleep just because you get into bed. But if you're already tired
Mm.
or feel tired or feel like you want to sleep prior to getting in bed, there's a high likelihood that you'll probably fall asleep. The sleep latency period, what the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep, is probably going to be a lot shorter,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
you're not getting into bed and getting yourself tired while you're in bed. You're already done. That's done. You've done that already. So I think that the the idea that a sleep routine has to be a certain special modality. I mean, if you enjoy doing something like journaling or meditation, um, it's fine. Also, if you want to put your blue light blockers on and watch The Office, that's American comedy. Maybe maybe you guys maybe something else. But my point is that that can work,
Yeah.
right?
Cool.
Because I know that sometimes when you would do something like that, you're not thinking about all the other stuff that's keeping you from getting into that parasympathetic state anyhow.
Mm.
So sometimes, and for certain personalities especially, something like meditating or journaling, forcing it, if you were doing it while you were already calm, you
Yeah.
probably can do it.
Mm.
But
Mm.
you're forcing it when you're not calm, perhaps.
Yeah.
Then it's going to be completely ineffective. So you'd actually probably be better off almost with a distraction in a sense,
Yeah.
which would be like the TV show or maybe reading a book if you like that because you're actively doing something,
Mm.
you're not just trying to sit there in your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't I think that we should rethink what a sleep routine is. Now, there are some things within that are pretty universal. Light, we know that the light piece is pretty universal.
Mhm.
That can be lighting within the house. So, if you want to do things like use red tinted bulbs or candle lights or just keep the lights minimal at that time of night, that's fine. That's helpful. Of course, blue light blocking glasses, buying a brand that's actually reputable. Generally, a lot of the stuff with red lenses on Amazon is not really blocking very large spectrum of light, so be careful with that. I've never really gotten away from the raw optics brand. It's what I've always just used
Me too.
because I know they work. I know they're not cheap compared to some of the other ones, but I do know that when I put them on, I can physically feel a difference when I put them on. And within a certain amount of time, if I'm just sitting there, I mean, I will physically get tired
Yeah.
in comparison to not having them on.
Mm,
Right? So, yeah, we know like the light thing is, and if you are engaging in some kind of activity, like it's a TV show, for example, or I don't know, maybe you're reading a book, you might not, and again, everyone's a little different. You might not want to do something that gets your heart pounding.
for sure.
You might not want to watch like this super crazy action movie that's completely has you, on the edge of your seat. Maybe you don't want to play Call of Duty
Yeah.
right up to 2 minutes before you get into bed. Maybe you don't want to do that. It might be fine a little bit earlier,
Mm.
but there's probably needs to be a cutoff time somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So just doing things that aren't quite as stimulatory and that you enjoy and that allow you to not think about or fixate on a bunch of bullshit that you probably don't even need to fixate on anyhow.
Yeah, for sure. I feel
So there
like,
you go.
yeah, I mean, in the bodybuilding space, a lot of us have the personality type where it's like, I need to be doing loads of stuff, and that can be quite difficult to sort of understand what chilling out is. And I certainly feel like over the years, it's like migrated from, you know, more the TV stuff, and then it was reading books. I went through a phase. Then I'm just not into books anymore. Back to TV with the blue light blockers on. Now I do my yoga later on rather than earlier in the day, and I build my little routine. And now, if that routine's off for a certain reason, like if we're staying at a hotel or whatever, it doesn't freak me out like it would have, because I'll still, watch the TV and put the blue light blockers on. But I agree, I think sometimes it's like you shouldn't watch the TV, or you shouldn't be able to, incorporate something like that. But I find it makes me very dozy if I've had my hot bath, then I do my yoga, and then we just eat a last meal and watch some TV, and it really chills me out. But
You're
it's
gonna fall asleep probably.
yeah, yeah. I start sort of going,
The funny thing is, so I have my ring tracks data and stuff. It's not an Aura ring. It's called Ultra Human, which is another brand if anyone wants to check it out. Or don't check it out if you can't handle data, don't check it out. That's probably not the right idea. Do not buy a data tracking ring. However, anyhow, it was funny because it said the other day, this couple weeks ago, the next day I had looked at it and it said we detected a nap from like 9:40 to whatever, and I'm like, that was me falling asleep on the couch at night. Should we record this in your sleep log? I'm like, probably not. That's yeah, that was me falling asleep with the TV on.
for sure. You raise actually naps as well. That would be quite cool to talk about that, because again, there's sort of stuff thrown around at certain times to nap, if you should or shouldn't nap, like this type of stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I dug into that several years ago. I honestly haven't looked at it a whole lot recently, but I can, more or less what I had found and what I feel like is pretty, again, when I say these things, I'm trying to think like what's universally applicable to most people. Everyone's different,
Mm.
but longer naps might not be the move when you're getting into certain length of naps because some literature suggests that might disrupt some of your actual sleep cycles that you're going through at night. And that could partially have to do with when the nap is during the day. Of course, probably the closer it gets to bedtime, the more that's going to happen.
Mm.
So sticking to shorter duration. One of the studies I had seen a while ago was showing something like even naps as short as 7 minutes had a pretty sharp cognitive benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they didn't, 7 minutes isn't going to get you into REM sleep or deep sleep or anything like that, but it had a pretty sharp cognitive benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what you're looking for, I mean, because a lot of time it's just you're getting like a refresher, a little bit of boost, a little bit sharper cognitively. So you probably don't need much, right? You probably don't want those naps where it's in the afternoon. And I don't know how many people have the luxury of doing this anyhow, but if you do, you probably really don't want those naps that if you're a 10 or 11 o'clock bedtime, that you're napping at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for two hours. That may start to cut into the rhythmic, nature of your actual sleep cycle at night. But naps inherently aren't bad. I mean, I guess here's the real question. If you need naps all the time, what does that say?
Yeah,
Is that a bad thing? Maybe that's the question you should ask is if you're frequently needing, if you're feeling like I could just nap multiple times a day every day, if I was able to, would that is that good? Is that bad? Uh, I would probably err towards more bad than good. I mean, it probably is suggestive of more negative things than it is positive things,
yeah.
right?
I'll give you a good example. I've got a client that's got a thyroid condition, and when she was working shift work and full-time work, she would need to nap to pretty much survive, as it were, because the gym and she does bodybuilding. Now she's not working at the moment. She hasn't needed to nap as much, and the thyroid condition is managed much better rather than the shift work, etc. Gym performance is better, sleep is better at night. But when she was doing all the shift work and trying to do everything else as a bodybuilder, the naps were really good for her. So, there's so many individual examples. Like you say, it's what suits you as a person. And I think that sometimes when we see like the buzzwords and the new subjects and all this stuff, it's like, but what works for you? And that's what we forget, right?
Yeah, it's a you're talking about like this whole recovery equation, and there's a lot that goes into that because sometimes you can only do so much with your environment. Your job is what it is, and maybe your schedule is what it is to an extent. So maybe napping is a good option because maybe that's if you have the ability to do it, even if they're short, maybe that's actually just supplementing your regular the sleep that's maybe not the best on the back end. And that's okay if it makes sense to do it. But it's usually the cases where like what I had said prior, I guess to expand on that, it's probably the cases where the people are already getting what would look like adequate sleep at night,
Yeah.
and then they're always needing to nap pretty consistently. That's probably an issue. And you see extreme examples of this too. And someone's like, "Man, I slept 10 hours, sleep 10 hours every day," and I'm like completely debilitated, tired. I'm like, "Well, sleep's not your problem." I
Something.
mean, unless that's like an extremely broken 10 hours where you're up most of it, we got something else going on that's creating a lot more fatigue debt here,
Mm.
right? There's also people that do fine on less,
Yeah.
you know. So
And in the bodybuilding space, sometimes it can be a sign of something like sleep apnea, right? Like if you're not getting quality sleep, and actually maybe you need to look at that.
yeah, well, yeah, of course. I mean, we know can be a pretty big issue with people anywhere from pretty mild to more severe, and some people sometimes to a point where it's maybe even dangerous for people uh, stopping breathing.
Mm.
So there's been, some of the research shows that, and then also there's all kinds of these like indirect. Well, I'm calling them indirect because I really think they are these like other disease states or health issues that are connected to sleep apnea, but you're like, well, it's not, it's really just because the sleep itself we know that like sleep deprivation is contributing to these issues. If you had sleep deprivation in any way, whether it was apnea related or not, you'd probably still be increasing your risk of a lot of these disease states. So it's not just because of sleep apnea, it's just because of sleep itself.
Mm.
But yeah, of course, we're getting a lot of, and I'm not going to claim to be a sleep apnea expert. I mean, I know enough to talk to a client about it,
Mm.
but the a lot of like the obstructive sleep apnea, I mean, even just from a structural standpoint because of muscles,
Yeah.
right? And then of course we see it more in higher body weight with people, even higher, maybe perhaps higher body weight relevant to the person.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be, because if high body weight to you, if you're a male, for example, is 220 pounds because you're like off season, you're only 5 foot,
Yeah.
you're only like 5'6". I mean, that might be the same as being 300 pounds at,
6.
6 foot
Mm.
or whatever. So definitely higher body weight. A lot of people's sleep apnea goes away when they lose body weight or their
When they
body weight
crack.
goes down. So that's a thing. I can say personally, I get I get some mild, I'm going to call it mild sleep apnea because I've had it tested and it was mild. I mean, I can't remember how many times, the breathing ceased or whatever, but
Yeah.
it was mild. And a lot of it's just because I don't, and the same thing with a lot of people is they maybe are heavy mouth breathers and they don't do well with nasal breathing
Yeah.
at night. So sometimes you can correct some of it just by, and I've had some success with certain clients just by even like mouth taping with
Yeah.
people.
That scares me.
Um,
That does.
okay, well, here's the thing about mouth taping is I sound like a biohacker. People are like, Austin's recommending mouth taping. I saw the biohackers on YouTube talking about it, like it's the best thing.
Mm.
First off, it's not that bad because a lot if you get actual mouth tape, most of it's like an elastic material that you can breathe through.
Okay. Mm.
So it's not like don't put duct tape over your mouth, right? No, just don't do that. Um, but the cool thing about mouth taping is, at least for me, it's almost like even if you're not the best nasal breather, when you put it on, it kind of tells you, I mean, your body's like, you need to breathe, so we're going to use your nose now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you actually breathe through your nose. So what's interesting is I've noticed this before where the tape, if you get good tape, so like a name brand, it usually stays on really well. But let's say it falls off and I wake up in the morning and I'm laying there. I'm like, for whatever reason, the tape fell off or it hit my pillow and, got pulled off or whatever. I'm still breathing out my nose
So you
a
retrain.
lot of the time.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, it's like there has to be something to that, right? And again, I don't know what that exact mechanism is. I'm sure it's just your body's not your body's not going to just let you stop breathing when you've got a whole nother passageway to breathe through. So you figure,
Mm.
it's just kind of redirecting it. Uh, but yeah, I've noticed that. Or even the craziest thing that kind of sold me on it was when I would have like upper respiratory congestion because of maybe seasonal changes or something. I don't get that all the time, but sometimes I do get a little sensitive to that, seasonal. I guess like mild seasonal allergies type of thing. Not too bad as long as my gut's doing well. And, but anyhow, I would put it on and then I could breathe out my nose. I'm like, this
Mm.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, really all that it took, and the other thing is I don't snore if my mouth tape is on, I do not snore at all. None.
Mm.
I could be as heavy as I want and I will not snore
Mm. Mm.
because I'm breathing out my nose and my mouth's not wide open. So, you know, take that for what you will. Some people definitely benefit from CPAP machine. CPAP is difficult for some people. The masks and getting used to the different types and getting one that works and all that stuff. That's kind of the most difficult part is a lot of people will say, if you can get the mask that works for you, you'll be fine.
What is that?
If you can,
Yeah.
if you can. I've seen so many people just give up on CPAP. They're
Same.
like, I just can't do it. I cannot get used to this damn thing. Or I've even had people do the nasal, what they call like the nasal pillow, I think is the one of the terms they use.
I
So
do.
it's the nasal cannula, I guess, mask.
Mm.
And I've had seen people mouth tape with the nasal mask.
Now,
So that actually, that to me actually, I think if I were to ever go back, I might consider trying that if I needed to, because I think that knowing that I do okay with the mouth tape, maybe that would work like with the nasal mask. But again, I just don't really think that I don't really think I need to do it. And I would say that there's probably a good amount of people that could get away without it,
mm,
but it's been life changing for certain people.
yeah, for sure. I feel like as well there can be, and this again is something in the bodybuilding space that sometimes isn't explored with, if you're a bodybuilder and your partner, like if the snoring, right? Like if that's very loud at the height of off season or whatever, it can actually, and I've known it disrupt quite heavily people's relationships. And then maybe it's the male bodybuilder, maybe the female. If they've got sleep apnea, then they don't want to get the machine, and then the partner's like, yeah, but you're snoring, and it can escalate quite a lot because there's considerations when it's sleep to the other person as well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the recommendations, usually the guy, right? Usually the guy's the bigger snorer than the female. It does happen the other way around. I mean, women snore too, trust me. I mean, because I've had plenty of female clients that have had that issue, and even females can get sleep apnea. So it's like,
Sure, for sure.
but but it's funny because I've had plenty of female clients where they're like, well, my partner snoring is the thing that keeps me up.
Yeah.
And so these recommendations, I just like, hey, you could tell them about this. Maybe suggest it. I know I'm not coaching them, but maybe consider telling them for the sake of both of you.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that's a real thing for sure.
For sure. And it is, it's quite sometimes a difficult conversation, but I mean, if you're listening, guys, whether you're male or female, communication is key with all of this. Now, this also is a tangent, but communication and bedtime routine, etc. Being able to, again, for me, many, many years I was bodybuilding and my other half wasn't, and I was like, this bedtime routine, I need this time and where, and then he'd be doing stuff and I'd get stressed and stuff like that. Being able to communicate and maybe include your partner as well. I know it's a bit adverse out of the subject, but like, can you do stuff together maybe and include them if they're not a bodybuilder as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't. I think that it's also probably a good whatever it is that you decide to do,
Mm.
because there's lots of different things you can do for your sleep routine, right? It's probably a good way to unwind and reconnect at the end of your day. Anyhow, people are really busy. It's, so I feel like it's kind of a win-win in that way. You can reconnect a little bit and unwind together and do something together. It doesn't have to involve a lot of talking necessarily. It's not like, I mean, maybe you want to have a conversation, maybe that's relaxing, but just being in each other's bubble
Mm.
can be, can be good. And that in and of itself, I mean, wow, you can go down the whole rabbit hole of what that can do for your neurochemistry.
Oh, sure. I'm
Um,
glad you said that.
with and without physical touch, right? So physical touch, like skin on skin, hugs, I don't know. I mean, a lot of stuff that can provide its own benefit to balancing, serotonin, dopamine levels, GABA levels, glutamate levels. But even without skin on skin, there's still benefits to it. So again, what does it go back to? You're doing something that you enjoy and that probably is reducing stress and makes you feel good, right? And none of notice none of the things I said were supplements,
Love it.
right? Now, supplements can be fine. I mean, listen, there's definitely benefits to that, and I don't have anything against it. But you're not, you're probably only going to make up so much ground with the bad habits, looking at supplements. Then if you get into pharmaceutical drugs, that's a conversation. That conversation is a little bit different because most of the pharmaceutical drugs that people would take, when you put them side, like if you put them side by side with, let's say you had, let's say you had the same amount of, you had like the same amount of duration of sleep and you fell asleep at the same time, all things kind of equated. Pharmaceuticals seem to make sleep worse in quality. What they do most often, depending on the class of the drug, because there are different things that people can use, is you fall asleep quicker
Knock you out.
and you're not anxious, right? They're taking away that aspect. So your sleep latency time goes down, but the quality of sleep might not be very good, which is why a lot of the people I've had that have used various things, usually they've used them for long periods of time. They've been pretty reliant on them for a long time. And if we're able to help them come off, they don't feel that like hungover feeling in the morning as much. They don't, you know, they're like, man, I feel so much more rested. Um, so I don't recommend. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure no one's surprised to that I don't recommend pharmaceutical drugs for being dependent on them for sleep. I don't know that most people are recommending that.
Yeah, I
Probably not.
feel what you touched on there with like anxieties and maybe someone's going through a traumatic time or something's really happening in the personal life. I feel like sometimes there's a gateway to utilizing certain things for on off or a lower dose or what have you, but there's so much available it can end up being you almost stack things, don't you? I know I learned in my last prep that it started with melatonin and then it was like antihistamines, various other things, and then I'm like taking so many fucking pills before bed, and I was like, I don't know how to get out of this hole almost because it was like, and then also the effect of Clen having that in the morning and the shelf life of that, and tail end
Yeah.
of prep, it was like 2 3 hours sleep, and it was I just sit there like I don't know what the
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that too. Man, there are so many little, man, there's so many little things that can go into this that have literally nothing to do with your sleep routine. Like, do you know the half-life of things that you're taking? Do the people listening know what the half-life of caffeine is, even, right? I mean, everyone's metabolism is different. So you can look at lives of things online. Now there may be slight differences depending on your metabolism and how well your body detoxifies from a liver standpoint, from a gut standpoint. But let's just say, for all intents and purposes, it's exactly the same for everyone or close. Even if you looked at caffeine, if it's 5 or 6 hours or somewhere in that vicinity, half life is half of, you know, what's in your system, essentially. So, not all of it, probably, unless it's a very small amount. And then, of course, half's probably mostly gone. But yeah, even that stuff, not taking in caffeine within 8 hours or 10 hours of bedtime or something in that general vicinity. Clenbuterol has a really long half life.
the fuck
So
up.
it's, yeah. And that's why a lot of the time with Clen, if I do have clients that use it, the doses usually stay pretty low. And you can almost always, not always, but you can almost always see when it starts to impact them. If they're providing feedback on sleep, you can see, oh, I escalated the dose from 40 micrograms to 60. And then that right there, that's when the sleep quality started to worsen. You're like, okay, pause, back down to 40, and let's hold there because I can pretty much guarantee that that little bit of basal metabolic rate increase that you're getting is probably not more benefit than getting less sleep every day, right? So it's some of that stuff just is not like it's not worth it. And then of course pharmaceutical stimulants and things, different medications, you know, stuff like that. So maybe even just understanding the half-lives of the prescribed or unprescribed pharmaceuticals that have a stimulating effect.
Yeah, you raise a valid point as well with you could be on multiple things, right? And again, it's like I feel like, and this would be relevant for people listening, when you're in a prep, you become so tunnel vision and you know you're gearing it, you're thinking fat loss, fat loss, fat loss, and maybe you start taking things and you don't tell your coach, or you get a stim over the counter, or you know you're stacking all these things, monsters, Clen, water, caffeine, you know, normal coffee, all of this stuff because you're chasing the fat loss and actually looking at your sleep a bit more and your general life, you could actually see a drop off if you're able to manage things better. But it's, you know, when someone's in a really heightened state and they're like, ah, you know, and they want to throw everything at it, it's like phew, quite difficult sometimes to get in there.
It's hard and it's scary. It's scary because maybe it's not a fat loss, a fat loss drug or an over-the-counter stimulant, but maybe it is a medication.
Mm.
It's really scary to think about having to stop it when a lot of the time when you went on the medication, something was going on, right? Which is why you started it. So you associate coming off of it with going back to whatever, like wherever you were at prior. And that's not just sleep. I mean, that's birth control is another great example. I mean, it's like having women on birth control for 20 years and they're like, well, I went on birth control for irregular periods. I said, you were also 16.
For sure. And you're
A
40.
lot has changed. you know, like a lot has changed since then. You could have had irregular periods for a number of reasons, one of which being that you were hitting puberty.
Mm.
And, but I mean, you're 36 years old now, not 16. And so but that's the same thing with the like a lot of long-term medication use, antidepressants, stimulant medications, all this stuff, so on and so forth. So it can be really scary, and I don't discount that at all. I just kind of tell people like this is something that we'll improve as much stuff as we can around this, and if you still we'll get as much improvement as we can, and if you're still not quite satisfied or we're not quite satisfied with what that is, just understand this is probably a limiting factor. So if we want to go any further with it, that we maybe have to have that conversation later. So maybe just plant that in there, push that off to the side a little bit at the beginning. Maybe you're not going in there guns blazing and trying, and you really shouldn't be if you're a coach, because we're not, our job is not to like go in and tear people's all their medications out, man. That is not our scope of practice. But we could educate them on some things, and then maybe later they make that, a lot of the time they make that decision on their own. It comes up in conversation 6 months later or something like that, and they make that choice because they just don't need it anymore, and they're confident that they don't need it anymore.
You're a good coach. You're guiding someone to make their own decisions a lot of the time. You know, of course, we're directing the journey, etc., of a lot of the things that we manipulate. But generally speaking, if it's something like this nature, and hence why I share your posts on social media, because it's like, stop selling people a dream, stop pretending you're a specialist in this and a specialist in that. Be able to just go, okay, so this, like you say, could cause a limiting factor. This is something we're going to work on first. This is something we'll work on next. And then you build that trust as well. And I feel like it just gets a little bit lost sometimes when we're trying to sort of fix everything. And like you say, go in all guns blazing rather than treat this person as a human, build the trust, build the rapport, give the education, and then see this as, you know, a journey rather than like, "Argh." You got to go on all these protocols and stress you out, you know?
Yeah, you kind of, with some things in coaching, there's definitely more than one way to do it, and there's probably more than one way to do it right even. So you don't really have to be pushy. I think with a lot of things that we do, you don't really have to be, you can be flexible as a coach in your approach, because there's probably more than one way to do things and more than one way to do it right even. But with some things, they are truly limiting factors. They really are. And that's where that's where providing a little more education, and the client kind of realizes that there really is only one good option here. It's kind of the only really good option. It's not like I have two options that are pretty close to the same. And so maybe with certain things like that, with medications and pharmaceuticals and stuff, like maybe that is a thing. They're gonna kind of choose themselves because they come to realize that I just don't need this thing anymore. And I really want to keep going and getting better results.
Mhm.
So but yeah, that's definitely I'm glad that got brought up because I know that now especially everyone wants to play doctor all the time.
I don't
Like
know.
it's not really.
I've said to you before, haven't I? Like, I can't quite quantify why you need to do that. Like, why would you want to do that? But of course, everyone has their own stuff going on, and they want clients and what
Yeah.
have you. With compounds, of course, one that's quite known for affecting sleep is tren, the night sweats and the disturbance to sleep. Is there any other compounds you think we could talk about that would maybe, like from the PD standpoint, that would affect sleep that people listening might think, oh, okay, that could be doing something?
Yeah, the we mentioned some of the stimulant related things, right? If you're using anything else that might change body temperature, like if you're someone that likes to use uncoupling agents like DNP, that could cause some sleep disturbances, maybe because you're just hot and uncomfortable. Thyroid, if you're overdoing thyroid, that if you're hyperthyroid, you shouldn't just arbitrarily dose thyroid meds. I mean, people can be hyperthyroid pretty easily, and that's definitely something that can impact sleep. With anabolics, with androgens, pretty, I would say that most of some people are just sensitive with any of them in high dosages, more dose dependent than anything. Of course, we know that things like trenbolone and some of the orals, like some of the more aggressive things, like halotestin and superdrol and anadrol and stuff like that can do it a little bit more. There's speculations on like what is that doing. We definitely like with trenbolone, we definitely know that it probably is neurochemical related. That it does have to do with neurochemical balance. So when I say neurochemical, you hear me say that word, I'm talking about things like serotonin, dopamine, GABA. There are others that people don't talk about as much, like glutamate. So it probably largely is in that realm as far as that's disrupting, because when you hear neurochemicals from, and this could be sleep or during the day, some are excitatory and some are inhibitory, and some can actually be a little bit of both. They excitatory would mean, again, heighten it would heighten you in some way. Dopamine would be excitatory, right? GABA would probably be considered inhibitory.
Mhm.
Now it's not just the idea of raising one or the other, it's also a balance. So even if most of them are normal, but one of them is very, very depleted, that could you, that could cause an issue with the balance of them. So that's also why with something like trenbolone, being that that effect probably is neurochemical related, you actually can see other changes in mood and changes in libido and changes in uh, thoughts,
Yeah.
changes in preferences, changes in all kinds of stuff, right? Again, dose dependent manner. If so, what's the solution to that? Use something else first off. That's the best solution. Or change the dose, or change the ratio of dosings that you're using. Maybe use less of that and a little more of something else that doesn't affect you.
Mm.
It's like I think that people always want to they always want to you, find something to just counteract something else. I'm like, well, there's other options.
Mm.
You know what I mean? You could just use less of that and maybe use more of something else, you know, and then you're done.
Mm.
It's not that you don't need all this other stuff, you don't need all these other things to try to counteract it. You start going down this rabbit hole, and again, you're stacking problems on problems. You're not fixing anything, so you do that in prep, because in prep you're already having prep, you're already having a circadian disturbance anyhow, just because your body's really fighting, you know, it's really fighting. You got to think prep's so interesting from a neurochemical standpoint.
Mm.
Anyone that's done it, anyone that's gotten, I guess maybe not just prep, anyone that's gotten like pretty lean for their personal self, meaning they're pretty far away from their normal baseline. We'll
Yeah,
say that.
yeah.
There's you know, dopamine, it's kind of a dopamine depleting behavior in a way. I mean, you see that there's a lot of, you start doing a lot of these seeking behaviors.
And then
You're
you're like,
trying to find it. Where's the dopamine? What do I need to do to get the dopamine? Do I need a, it can be just like taking more stimulants, or it could be actual behaviors. It could be like shopping,
yeah,
buying too much. I saw someone on Facebook recently and he said, you know, you're in prep. He bought a new truck.
yeah. People buy
He's like,
cars. I'm like, what?
oh yeah. Like don't make any irrational, don't make any huge financial decisions when you're in the later stages of prep. I just don't feel like that's the best idea.
For sure, for sure.
It's definitely not going to be, you might look back on that later.
Yeah. It is seeking stuff though, isn't it? Like I feel like there's certainly there's parts of it and it goes in, at the depths I can't even be fucked to do online shopping. I'm like, "Ugh." But that there's certain.
Yeah, it's just you're so tired.
Yeah, yeah, you're like, and the thing is, sleep can often be like my sleep really for the whole, even when I was natural, is always been affected by prep. But then I know other people that sleep for 8, 10 hours in a prep. I guess there's going to be, so many factors within that. In a prep scenario, when people are struggling to sleep, unless it's insomnia based, I always try and say, try and rest in bed, try and maybe read if your mind is going. Is there anything else, if you've got a busy mind and you are in a deficit, have you got any tips other than that that people could think about?
I think that similarly to what we said earlier, something that happens in prep that, and I suppose this could happen out of prep, but especially in prep, is when you get hyperfixated on something, what do you tend to do? You tend to stop paying attention to other things that maybe even stuff that you like, right? There may even be like hobbies and interests that you completely just delete
Yep.
out of your life, you know? So something that I've always said to people in prep is like, well, within reason, I mean, you have to, depending on what your hobbies are, but within reason, you should kind of try to live as similarly as you can the whole time, you know? So if you had hobbies and things that you enjoyed outside of prep, you should really try to maybe continue them in prep as much as you can, assuming that they're not based around extreme physical activities that you can't recover from, or they're like, you know,
Eating challenges.
going on food binges or something. I mean, yeah, you can't do that in prep, or binge drinking on the weekends. I mean, that's not going to work. But there's a lot of other stuff that people could probably indulge in that aren't physically demanding that they would like, but unfortunately you get really hyperfixated, so you kind of just get rid of that stuff, you're not really worried about it. I know for me, but again, I think that's for a lot of bodybuilders all the time. I think prep is just amplifies it, but there's a lot of people, especially in the earlier years in bodybuilding, right? Some people grow out of that and they mature and they realize that they can bodybuild and still like other stuff. It's a really weird concept. They think not liking other stuff would make them better, but that doesn't work.
For
You
sure.
probably will burn out and you
Yeah.
probably will get lesser results. I mean, maybe not at first, but you're going to hit a point where you realize, wow, this is not working for me. I am really driving a lot of sympathetic tone all the time because I'm still doing the same stuff. I'm still eating the same meals. I'm still doing the same training. So what else do I need to think about? And you realize, well, there's actually some other time in the day,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? So you can focus that on your relationships. You can focus that on your hobbies. You can focus that on a business, maybe if that's something. I've seen people do really good things with their business even
Mhm.
in prep because they're kind of just trying to keep themselves engaged and focused on something, right? And I would venture to say that probably all of those things are a better alternative than sitting there just thinking about the stuff that you're already going to do anyhow. So I know in my last prep, it was probably the busiest I've ever been. I mean, I've always been a pretty busy person, but this time it was even more so from all angles, life, family, business. And I remember like taking photos to, progress photos. I bet, this is no lie, I bet that I did not take more than 3 to 5 photos outside of that and look at myself in the mirror pretty much at all outside of those photos. And a lot of people are stopping every 5 seconds.
It's
5 seconds, abject. And look, that's fine. It's a lot of hard work. That is exciting. That is super cool. I'm not knocking anyone. I just didn't have time. I had other stuff to do, and the prep still worked well. So it's funny. It's funny because it was kind of like I've been practicing that over the years, but that was even a more eye-opening experience where I'm like, man, I really didn't think about this a whole lot. I remember telling Michelle that I had to do a qualifier show before nationals, and I remember sitting there on Tuesday, and the qualifier show was on Friday, Saturday. I was leaving for the show on Thursday, and I thought, I'm competing this weekend. I probably ought to pack some clothes or something. I think, I'm like, man, I should probably get my stuff ready to go. Make sure, that was it. I didn't even, what a bizarre, people are counting down every single day. They're like, it's peak week every day. Woo. And I'm like, oh shit, it's almost time to go.
I do think as well that like the more experienced competitors I get on, I've actually had a couple of podcasts recently where it's like actually when you're a bit more like there's shows that you can do, like let's see how we go in a prep, let's start a diet. Okay, it's turned into a prep. And
Yeah,
it's not easy, but it's easier because you know what you're
it
doing.
helps.
Like
Yeah. Yeah, I think that helps. I think that's it's and of course that carries over into all things, even sleep. I mean, again, you're just doing the stuff, you're just checking the boxes, you're just doing the routine. It's it's the same stuff you do. Like, don't get me wrong, there will become a point where you can't ignore the fatigue and
yeah,
you can't ignore maybe the hunger, perhaps. That's a real thing. But you can definitely set yourself up better by not fixating on something that's probably not even there yet. It's this idea that prep is starting.
I love
Flip
it.
the switch. I said, what switch are you flipping? Like, what are you doing that you weren't already doing?
I
And
love
if you
this.
weren't all yeah, it's like if you weren't already doing most of those things, you probably didn't really have a very productive off season anyhow. Uh, so you kind of just doing the same stuff, maybe just a little more or less of something or more of something. Uh, but it's all kind of the same.
But when you accept that and acknowledge that's a thing, like in my own mind, I'm doing a diet at the moment. It's not a prep yet, but and I'm like, it's just so fucking good. Like I just feel because
Yeah,
I'm doing
not
what I did
bad.
in off season. I'm eating less, I'm leaner, and I'm doing more cardio. Like everything else
Yeah.
from a base level is the same, and it's like, oh. Now, before we wrap up, I have to ask you a question because it's something I've explored over the years. Do you recommend that people should eat a certain window before they go to bed, or because I find it's, person dependent, but have you got any expansion on that?
With yes and no. With smaller meals, it probably matters less.
Mhm.
With larger meals, there probably is something to be said about spacing those out a bit from bedtime. You see, I've seen that both in, from like a mechanism standpoint, but also just anecdotal data, like actually like looking at my ring and seeing the metrics on there.
Yeah.
My heart rate doesn't drop as quick. The sleep's not quite as restful if the meal is too close to bed, especially when the meal is larger. So in the off season, so you could do, I mean, I suppose you could just structure your meals in a way where the meal is smaller, but if you're in the off season, at some point they're all you can't. You just there's not really much you can do there. It's just the food is higher. So I would say that yeah, it probably matters. It probably matters a little bit more the more that you're eating probably matters. And again, it's probably going to be again person dependent, size of meal, person's metabolism, person's speed of digestion. But if I were to just throw out like a general recommendation, I would say that if you are somebody that eats right, eats and then jumps right in bed, try try finishing your meal an hour before bed. Start there. See what happens with your sleep. Like try it out. See how that feels for you. See if your sleep is better. See if you fall asleep quicker. See how that happens or see how that works for you. In prep, it becomes difficult because, of course, everyone's hungry and they don't want to go to bed hungry and yada, yada, yada. I get it. I get it. You break the rules a little bit there, maybe. Again, the trade off is maybe I can't fall asleep at all. So maybe a better option is to eat a little closer.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think most of the time, you would probably benefit from having a little bit of time before bed. It for some people, they even say 2 hours. They're like, man, I feel even better with 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Feeling better with 2 hours. I'm a I usually fall in the range of about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm about an
And
hour.
that's mostly because that's just what works for my schedule and just getting all my food in
Yeah.
throughout the day. I would try honestly, I would be very curious to even try 2.5 or 3 hours and like just to see, but I can't get all my food in
Yeah.
right now. I don't know. Not much I can do at that point. Um, so I kind of fall around 2 hour or about an hour and a half. And it definitely helps because if I eat too close to bed, my ring always alerts me the next day that my heart rate took a lot longer to drop. And, my body temperature changed and all this stuff. It's not crushing my sleep score or anything, but it's definitely noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
You
It's
know, it's definitely
it's
noticeable.
isn't it? Like I feel like it's quite exciting as well. If you're okay with data and you don't get too obsessed, you can sort of be like, oh, well, what did I change there? What? And this is
Yeah.
bodybuilding also, the exploration and going a bit nerd mode sometimes about your own makeup, you know?
Yeah. I don't really get, and that's the thing is I don't really get that. I don't really have a problem just kind of trying those things out and stuff. And because I'm not really attached to if it doesn't work, I don't care. I'll just won't do it. It's not the end of the world. Um, and I pretty much know what works at this point. I mean, basically with every component, things change as you get older and your body changes and stuff. But yeah, I think that it is something you definitely have to be careful with. Like I said, I would never. There's some people I would never recommend, and I say never. That's the very absolute statement, but that's serious. Like I just would not recommend tracking certain things and worrying about certain things. It is going to be way more of a detriment, and probably would say that that's true for more people than it's not.
I agree. I agree
There
fully.
is not a whole there is not a whole lot of people in bodybuilding or the serious fitness enthusiasts that can detach enough from different things to be able to do that stuff. They might think they can, but it's not that many people.
The brain's going crazy. I love it. I love it. Well, we said we'd go on loads of tangents, and I feel like as well, it's like sleep is almost labeled as this boring thing and stuff, but you can see we've covered a whole episode there of loads of stuff. So it's been super
Yeah,
cool.
that was awesome. I had
Yeah.
really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we were able to do that.
Yeah, always appreciate you and give Michelle a hug for me.
I will. I will absolutely do that.
Thank
Make
you.
sure you yeah, feel free to tag me in any clips and things and I will promote where I can.
Thank you.
Awesome. All
Have a
right.
good
Have a great
day.
day. Great
Bye.
night. See you later.
Yeah. Bye.